I've now survived 1380 days in Minecraft Hardcore, and in all that time, I've never used a bed to skip the night. But before we start, please subscribe, check out my TikTok and join the Discord, and I wanna give a huge shout out to Loony, who inspired me to once again start the hardcore world when I'd already given up. Chapter 1. An almost blind start. It was very early in the morning and the sun was just starting to appear on the horizon when it happened. But what happened? Well, to this day I don't exactly know it myself, but I suppose I just appeared out of thin air. But this wasn't the only thing I didn't know. To be totally honest, I didn't really know anything at all, neither who I was, nor why I was here. But where even is here? I started to look around a bit, and I was standing on a beach. And right in front of me there was an ocean. I then turned on the spot and found that there was a forest behind me. It was crammed full of thick trees with a very darkly colored wood, so that I couldn't see into it very far. But I did notice some gigantic brown and red mushrooms. I also noticed some other way smaller trees, and when looking at them I somehow knew what they were called. The light brown ones were oak trees and the white ones were birch trees. And as I was standing there wondering about myself and trees and everything else, I realized that I should maybe start doing something. The sun had already risen above the ocean, but I was still standing there and I hadn't moved at all. I started to walk towards the forest, and without really knowing what I was doing, I began to punch the tree, which, most amazingly, began to break. I then made myself a crafting table and went on to punch down some of the giant mushrooms, and with a mixture of brown and red mushrooms I was able to make a large amount of soups that would keep me alive for the time being. All of this had taken me quite some time, so I ran back to the beach, crafted myself a little boat, put it into the water, jumped in, and the only thing I knew was that I wanted to travel around the world and find a place that was magnificent enough for me to permanently settle down at. Chapter 2. This is home. I had been rowing along the coast for just a few minutes, but the sun had already started to set, and I knew that I wouldn't wanna be out in the open at night. So I was very relieved when I noticed a sunken ship right underneath me. I decided that it was the best hiding place for the night I would be able to find, and with that I left my little boat and dove down into the shipwreck. And with the help of loads of doors, I drained the whole thing overnight. When I was done, the sun had begun to creep up on the horizon again, and with that I swam back up to the surface and continued to travel. From now on, I traveled further and further until night came upon me, which was when I'd usually inhabit some already existing structure. I wasn't always able to find these structures though, so I sometimes just lived in a tree like an elf, or simply dug myself a little hole into a nearby hill. But I never slept at night. I had to travel for 10 days, but at long last I'd finally found a place to settle down at. Chapter 3. Beating the game. But first and foremost, it was important for me to find a safe haven so that I could start to make some progress without hiding every night. So I decided to make myself a home in the nearby village, which was at the perfect location since it was on a little peninsula cut off from the mainland by a huge cliff and easy to spawn proof with a few torches. I immediately got to work enslaving the natives, as any half-decent European would do, growing my own jungle trees and trading with the locals. It was a long and slightly tedious process, but I didn't regret a second of it. And when I was just about 25 days old, I was finally wearing full diamond armor with protecting enchantments and was fully prepared to fight. I then decided to make my way to the Nether and search for a Nether fortress. The journey was way more dangerous than my traveling at the start, but with my new gear and tools, I didn't have any significant problems when fighting anyone who dared to attack me. And after a few days, I found what I had searched for, grabbed the blaze rods I needed, and traveled back home to go and search for the stronghold on day 32. Finding the portal room was quite an easy task, and on day 39 I entered the end, fully ready to fight my most dangerous enemy yet. After jumping into the portal, I appeared on an obsidian platform that was much further away from the main island than expected. But I had prepared myself well enough. I just had to throw my ender pearl to the island to teleport there. And after I had done that, I shot crystal after crystal after crystal until all of her healing crystals were destroyed. So I began to shoot her with my bow and stab her with my sword and slowly chopped away at her health. And sure enough, after some time, she was defeated. At that point, I stopped the grind for a second to take a moment and think about myself. This was the first time I had done so since the day I had started my journey. It was curious, I thought. As soon as I had started doing stuff, I knew what I had to do. What I had to do to make progress, to beat the final boss, just as if I had done all of it before. And then I decided that if it was so easy for me to do the right thing, I should just continue doing stuff. And with that, I traveled to the Outer End Islands. This was dangerous, probably even more dangerous than the dragon fight, since I had to constantly bridge over the void, always fearing to fall off. But I managed to survive, and as soon as I got my hand on the first pair of wings, I knew that the game had just started. They looked just like the wings of these phantoms that had haunted me every night and had tried to kill me, but had been too weak. And now I could fly like them. Now they didn't have any advantage over me anymore whatsoever. I ripped them apart in mid-air. Literally. Chapter 4. The Grind. I didn't return to overworld projects after the end raiding. I actually stayed there to build an Enderman XP farm. And while doing so, I constantly had visions. Visions of myself falling and infinitely falling into the pitch black void. While building the thing, I came to a conclusion. Something I'd kinda been suspecting for some time already. I'd had a former life. A life in another world. A life that was the reason for my mysterious knowledge. But I didn't have that life anymore. So I must have died there. Something must have gone terribly wrong. I hadn't been cautious enough. But that thought didn't discourage me. On the contrary, it motivated me. Knowing that I had made some sort of mistake the last time made me determined. Determined not to mess up this time. Determined to get bigger and better than I'd ever been before. Determined to succeed. I had now done tons of stuff. I had built myself a starter house with a beautiful garden on a custom little island. I had built an automatic bee farm, an iron farm and a starter gold farm. I had made an insane villager trading hall containing 192 villagers with the help of my villager breeder. I had gotten a shulker box with every sort of maxed out netherite tool as well as basically everything else you could ever wanna carry around in your ender chest. I had failed miserably at building a slime farm. I had constructed a flying machine farm within the first house of my western village. And last but definitely not least, I had built a gigantic Scar Hermitcraft Season 7 inspired drill, encasing a pretty big creeper farm. And that one is still the single biggest thing I've ever done here. After all of this progress, I was now already about 1.5 years old, and I was starting to feel like an advanced person. I felt like in my other life I'd never reached the point I was at now. At this point, I was really happy with where I was. I'd gotten the most important stuff in terms of setting this world up out of the way, but there was one thing I was still really afraid of. I'd gotten a whole bunch of those magical totems of undying by forcing raids onto villagers and then killing the evokers, but that wasn't the thing I was afraid of. I was afraid of the fact that I'd already used those multiple times. Every time I did, I could have just died too. At that rate, it wasn't gonna be long until at some point something would actually kill me. But I didn't know what to do about this, other than just try to be careful, and so I just carried on building. Chapter 5: The Ultimate Plan. Now I had already built 3 nice buildings, but all of them had been for a very practical use, like hiding a farm of mine I really needed but it didn't look any good, or being a starter home. So next up I wanted to create something purely for the sake of building something nice, and I would neither plan it out as thoroughly as my other stuff, nor make it a specific size to encase a farm. And with that I was able to just build whatever I wanted at any size, and I went with a pirate ship. Everything decorative I'd constructed up to this point had been very satisfying, in a way that after months of building, it all just came together nearly exactly the way it had been planned. But this one was different. I had just started gathering tons of materials that seemed fitting until I reckoned there were enough of them to construct a decent ship, and then I started building it. Not layer by layer, but piece by piece, incorporating a bunch of different things from different pirate ships that had come before it, and increasing the amount of details over time. And after over 2 months of relentless construction and sleepless nights, I ended up with Pesky Bird, a ship I was really proud of, sure. I could have made it look even better, and made the building process easier for myself by planning ahead, but that would have made it way less enjoyable. This way, I had to design and find solutions on the spot, and therefore, at the end of this, even with all its imperfections, this ship felt much more like a work of art than an industrial, practical and efficient building. But why did I decide to call it Pesky Bird? Well, that is because in it there lives a pesky bird that I had adopted a few months prior to this project without any reason other than I wanna have a pet. But after just a few days I realized how selfish that was, as this animal definitely wasn't happy just sitting around all day long. But now I finally transformed him into Jack the Pirate, and built a whole ship for him alone, with which he can journey around the 7 seas and raid and plunder all those landlubbers. As I had enjoyed that creative process so much, and my world was, despite all the progress that had already been made, a big old mess of only 90% finished projects, I started cleaning it up. I changed the shape of whole mountain ranges and islands, built pathways, connected my starter base to the ground, improved Jack's home a little bit, and finally even built a friend for him, Dobby Mick. All of that took quite a while, but eventually I moved on to my next, most insane project. I wanted to have 12 hearts at all times, which could only be achieved by eating a golden apple every 2 minutes. And that's ridiculous. but I still decided to try it, and so I started building one of the most efficient gold farms to ever exist, which would get me about 13,000 gold ingots or enough gold for over 1,600 golden apples per day. So every day I spent there would give me access to 166 days of 12 hearts, and with that I could theoretically spend 69 days at that farm and get myself over 11,000 days of 12 hearts. And so I built and built and built until I'd finally finished the whole thing, which is when I started slaying piglins for 69 days straight. And finally, on day 1137, I had done it. I then went to my sorting system and crafted up all the gold nuggets into gold ingots, and those into gold blocks. And it was indeed enough gold to have 12 hearts for about 3,000 days. Only about a third of the amount I had actually wanted. And to this day, I don't know what exactly went wrong there, but at the time, I just told myself I was gonna fix it soon and do another run, but there was still a lot of time left until I'd run out. Chapter 6 R.I.P. And now that I was already over 3 years old, I went back to decorating ugly but useful structures. In this case, my villager breeder. For this, I wanted to build my first religious building in this world, as nearly every culture in the world has one of those in some way, shape or form. And with that, as the second building of my western village, I constructed a church to memorialize God, because Technoblade never dies. This had been a very planned out build once again, but I nonetheless really enjoyed the building process as well as the end result. After this insane upgrade, trading was just way more fun and I really adore the interior as well as the exterior design for this. But now, onto the next project. After building loads of farms and decorative builds, I was getting increasingly happy with this world and the things I'd done in it, but I felt like I hadn't quite experienced all of the facets of this incredible world so far, and in order to change that, I made myself a list of things I wanted to achieve. First off, there were some very easy things I could just quickly do at home, like perfectly hitting a target block in the middle, tricking powdered snow or trading with one of my friends, but in the middle of the year, and I checked off all of those fairly quickly. Next up, I did some things I really had to explore this world for. So I visited every biome, ate every food including an enchanted golden apple, bred every sort of animal and sneaked into a deep dark. All of that took quite a lot of time and effort, but eventually I completed every exploring related advancement and I went back for the last category of achievements: preparation. This included all of my goals that I had to prepare loads of stuff for or that were really scary to me. So I made one of every sort of frog and put them on a lead. I shot 5 mobs at once, I got a ghast into the overworld and killed him. I tried MLGing from world height to bedrock and failed, thus using another totem, and I tried getting Froglight, but it just didn't work, and I have no idea why. And then, after all of that success and 2 miserable fails, I finally decided to tackle the hardest out of all of my goals, and that was to have all possible effects, but at the same time. In order to do this, I needed several different structures, and I located an area where they were all relatively close together. Then I hooked them all up with nether portals so that I could quickly travel between all of them before hopping into the scary structure where the main part of this would be executed, the ancient city. I took loads of wool with me and went on a mission to destroy all skull creakers so that no dangerous wardens could spawn anymore. And so I began to sneak around, loot all of the chests, trap all of the shriekers I could find in wool, and whenever I messed up, I would just quickly fly away and continue my quest in another part of the city before the warden had spawned, and only come back to the area once it had dug itself into the ground again. Because of this, there were actually several wardens around just in this one city most of the time, but it was such a big structure that I could always just fly into another part of it. But this whole mission got a little bit harder once one of the wardens wasn't shook off so easily and he followed me. But being the advanced guy that I now was, I didn't worry too much and decided to fight him. Chapter 7 My Secret Mission. Hi, I'm Jack, and I was Bipixel's parrot back when he was still alive. You might wonder who wrote the story, because Bipixel is obviously dead, and I can tell you. It was me, and I'm not quite done with telling you the story yet, because there's one secret mission that my owner had never explained to you. So, to just come straight to the point, he wanted to collect at least one of all of the items that exist in the world. And he didn't try doing that in one go, but he divided the mission into regularly getting small portions of the whole collection, which was meant to be done by the time the first movie about this world was made. But that one will unfortunately never get completed, and I just tried telling you about the first half of it the best I can. But even though this project, together with many others, never got finished, and so many more that little over-enthusiastic player had planned never even got started, I think he was already very happy with this world. Not just because of the glorious distant future he tirelessly worked towards, but also just because of the things he'd already achieved so early in his life, and also because of the path he was taking rather than the destination it could have eventually gotten him to. And maybe Bipixel was a bit lonely. He did after all go to great lengths in order to try and make it look like there are others, when he was in fact all on his own in this world. Maybe Bipixel is now happier, somewhere in afterlife, finally remembering everything about his past lives again, and maybe even meeting others from that gigantic multiverse that so many people are a part of, and where despite that, everyone is on their own, in their own worlds. Or he is not in fact ended existence. Maybe he is out there somewhere, starting all over again, and this time progressing even further, but with a new, different challenge on his hand. And maybe in this new world, he isn't even alone. Maybe a bunch of people from that multiverse are with him, and together they achieve greatness that no one player alone could ever get to. Yeah, that's gotta be it. That's the continuation this story deserves.